Thank you so much. So yeah, we're here today to talk about see this now. We're here today to talk about two projects that were originally built using Drupal, but kind of as the projects came to their end, we realized that we needed to reevaluate the technical platform. And so these are two projects, two separate stories, but with a similar endpoint. And perhaps some lessons for all of us who are working with dynamic content management systems about what it looks like to end a project. So I will begin by turning it over to Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Honig. I'm in the art history department at the University of Maryland, but when I worked with Quinn, I was at Berkeley. So those were our connective days. I took my header for this talk, for this slide, from the title of Tom Nichols' book, The Death of Expertise, which traces the sad saga of anti-expertism that culminated in the Trump era. But way before Trump, I set out to kill the kind of expertise that is usually embodied in a massive, weighty catalog of an artist's works. One person becomes the acknowledged single expert on that artist, and then they author a catalog containing all of their decisions about that artist, like what paintings he really did and what drawings, or she, and which ones are from their students or their imitators. I didn't want to kill all expertise, I hasten to say, but I wanted to kill it around one artist, Jan Brueghel, because I felt that his work was uniquely inimical to treatment by a single expert. The website that I set out to create was going to be a scholarly catalog, and it would be loosely under my supervision, but it would largely lack claims to expert judgment of any single individual. I have the next slide. To assemble this website, I traveled with a team of undergraduate assistants to several image collections in Europe. The collections librarians were very generous, and they allowed us to just photograph every single image they had, along with all the metadata that had been gathered around those images. And we simply ignored all copyright restrictions because, hey, it was going to be a website, not a book. And so what the heck? This was all happening in about 2012 to 2014. It was still pretty novel for a team of people to go around building a website like this. So the places that we went to were super accommodating. We took all of our photographed data back to Berkeley, and we started building pages with images and metadata for every object. We were doing this as pages rather than, say, as spreadsheets, because we were building a wiki. Okay, next page, next image rather. I believe that it was Quinn who would later say to me when she entered our project, "Oh, a wiki. All humanists think that a wiki will solve their problems." It did seem really perfect for our expertise killing goals. We figured that most people knew how to contribute to a wiki, and so we would encourage them to likewise contribute to our site. It couldn't be just anybody contributing, although we did have some kind of out there contributors, including a guinea pig fancier who came in and identified all of our guinea pigs, and that was exciting. But basically, our hope was that other art historians would register as users, and then they would put their opinions and disagreements and suggestions onto our site, so that the catalog of Jan Brueghel's work would become a kind of group undertaking. And to encourage them to do this, we went around and demonstrated the site at various conferences and showed people how to use it. Can I have the next image up here? So These screenshots are actually from the site as it now exists, having been metamorphosed into a Drupal site, but I'll just explain what's here. It looks similar to our wiki, but now it is a data-based website. It's also a very complicated website with a large range of search function, browsing by image types, tagging, bibliography, and so forth. The basic unit is still the page, like the one on the left here. And there is all the fundamental data about each artwork, including its size, its support, its location, the various opinions about its attribution, and also the provenance, because art history catalogs always have provenances. Then there's a row of tags, which we gave to the images. And then at the bottom, there are a number of possible sort of pull-out sections. This image has a lot of related works, so that's what you're seeing first. And then you could go to the bibliography, and then you get to a discussion. And on the right here, I'm showing you a sample discussion page. I've put some ideas of my own. Well, actually, first, some guy named Stefan Bartila put his points about this painting, and then I responded later. So this was exactly the kind of thing that I had hoped would happen. He's also given us some links to objects for comparison, and on other pages, scholars put links to articles that they had written or data that they had about the object. And this was exactly what we wanted. Next image. Also on the Drupal site, there was a My Research section with tools that we had designed and had constructed that would enable scholars to do their own research, to compare similar objects using various devices. I'm not sure how many scholars really did this, although when we demonstrated it at these conferences, everyone was very excited. And I did have my students use this tool to do research and to do network analysis of the patterns of related images that we uncovered. Now, Quinn, you wanted to put in some words here, so I hand over to you next, I think.
Yeah, so this is sort of an aside for the Drupal familiar members of the audience here. This project was a multi-site setup where there was the Jan Brueghel site, the Peter Bruegel site, and there was a family site, but they were all sharing a single database and a single hosting instance. There were field collections in order to deal with some compound field issues, especially regarding the provenance. So looking at, where it was, when, and who owned it. There were node references sort of pointing between things, taxonomies everywhere. There was a taxonomy for basically like every metadata field practically, and the bibliography module for storing some of the bibliographic references. Back to you, Elizabeth.
So at a given point, we had to decide that we were finished. And I thought about why we decided that when we did, because Quinn asked me to address, like, when is a humanist's web project over? And that's really hard, because a lot of it has to do with being sick of writing grant applications. And the fact is, you can never get a grant that just finishes what you've been working on. You always have to think of something more to do that you can get money for, which will then actually be used to finish what you had been working on, but now you've committed to doing more. And that was part of why this project just kept growing and growing and growing and becoming more and more complicated. And also, I was just ready to move on to new projects. But also, what I thought was a good reason for stopping was that I felt that all the major scholars who were going to contribute their expertise to this had now done so, and that we weren't going to be getting a lot of new stuff. And could I have the last of my slides? So now at some point soon, we will have this static site. And it will simply contain all of the material that had been collected and generated by the old one. It won't be open to the world of users contributing discussions to it, but it still won't just be an old-fashioned book-based catalog, because it started as a collaborative anti-expert project. And in a sense, that's still what we've got. And so I will be happy with it when it becomes stable. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, so we'll transition here to our second project. So at the same time, about 2 hours apart by freeway. Meanwhile, at Stanford, there was another project that had gone along a similar path of building a Drupal site and then trying to figure out what the long-term prospects for it were. So over to you, May.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm May Veloso-Lyons. I'm a graduate student in the comparative literature department at Stanford in my 6th year. And way back in my 1st year, I co-founded this project with a professor in the German department. So we've been working on it for half a decade at this point. And it started really small. Our ambitions were minimal. By kind of happenstance that year, there were a number of people on campus who could translate Middle High German. And so we thought, wouldn't it be fun to get together on a weekly basis and translate untranslated texts from Middle High German to English? That's one of the variants of German that medieval German texts are written in. So we were producing these translations and people were bringing in texts that they thought would be fun to translate, which were usually short to kind of do in 3 or 4 weeks. But we were realizing by the time there was always someone taking notes, typing it up, that probably 6 to 8 scholars had worked on that translation. It had been collaborative by the time it was finished. And it was actually, therefore, like of a good quality. And really, we all wanted to be able to then use them in our classes, use them for reading lists. And that wasn't, and potentially work on them ourselves. Now there's kind of a version that we had. And that wasn't something that we knew how to easily make accessible or preserve. So we kind of thought, well, the obvious place to put it in this time, this era, is the internet. So let's think of how we can do it. And in our minds, my co-founder and I, we had the kind of hard copy translation edition facing page book. And so we thought, how can we do that on the internet? Make it maybe a little bit more flexible, a little bit more jazzed up if possible, but really we just kind of want the materials that we've produced to be available to scholars and findable and well preserved. So we went to our academic technology specialist, which we're lucky to have in the department, and this is the person prior to Quinn who filled this role, and asked him what he thought we could do, how we could do this most effectively. And at this point, both of us my co-founder and I had no idea about any of these things. And it's amazing how quickly you become, at least if not an expert, very conversant in tools when you're actually using them. But the learning curve of the first year was really enormous. So when we first came to him, it was really from a position of ignorance, and whatever you advise will do. And so he quickly found a tool called versioning machine. Next slide, please. Which is a scholar-based open source piece of software, which we were excited about, which was created to be able to easily compare different versions of the same text. So for example, if you look at the next slide, exactly, that's I mean, you can't really see this probably, but it's an Elizabeth, I think it's an Elizabeth Bishop poem. And so she changed she wrote different versions of things. And so here there's 2 different versions, and you can easily see them side to side and see where they come from, this kind of bibliographic information on the side. And so it kind of, not quite, but kind of replicates the idea of a text in the original language and a translation. Look at them side by side. And we thought, great, this seems good. This is built by a humanist for scholarly purposes. Let's adapt it to our own purposes. But while we were thinking through how to build this thing, which was just going to be a collection for all the translations we had, we were talking about it to colleagues who worked in other languages, and they were like, oh, I mean, I have so many translations I've done for classes, done for an essay or something, and done for my own research, and I don't know where to put them. So would you want to have those as well? And hence the Global Medieval Sourcebook was born. And became a big name because global, really, you then want to reflect the diversity of the globe. But at the time, we just thought global medieval sourcebook because we're open to anyone's material that they want to submit to us. And we'll put it on the site. We'll do some version of this versioning machine thing, and it will be great. So if you see that, show the next slide. So this is an early version of the site, and you can see we kind of restyled it a little bit, but this is probably the best example of us using it kind of in the way that the tool was anticipated to be used. And so we have a critical text here, a translation, and then a transcription kind of directly from a manuscript. And you can see above that there are 5 versions. So there are actually 3 different manuscripts of the same text, which have survived to the present, and they have been copied out. And the critical text is the one that's going to kind of merge the 3, found the best readings, and prepared that. So the person using the site can compare them. There's this highlight function, which shows which line matches with another. And there's also, you can embed images of the manuscripts, which we in this case had for all 3 manuscripts. And you can click it, it expands into a window. It's not great, but you can kind of make it larger, zoom in, zoom out, really basic functions. And you can choose which of these columns to display. And so when we started to show this to colleagues, they were really excited because it does seem like a great environment to compare different versions. However, we became very quickly cognizant of the fact that we have created this project, which is the Global Medieval Sourcebook. People were submitting material from very different traditions. And this particular kind of case where there are various manuscripts, we have the manuscripts as images, which we have the rights to use. And also, in this case, this is Old French and English, where the length of the translation versus the transcription are pretty similar. So when you toggle between with the highlighting function, it kind of matches and you can kind of see where you're going. That doesn't really work very well for many other languages or many other forms of text. So I have a few examples here to show you. So I think the next slide is an Arabic text. Yeah, exactly. And so you can see that the translation is cut off at some point because you have to scroll down to see it because it's much longer. Yeah, and so then the next one, I think, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is, yeah, so we have Arabic, we have here, this is a Greek script. So what we actually ended up having, these examples are much more representative, and this is of the current version of the site, is that we have just 2 versions, a text and a translation, and they may be very different lengths. The highlighting doesn't make sense. And for many texts, including, so I'm not sure which is the next slide. Can you show it, please? Yes, so this is Hebrew. This is part of, it's from the Talmud. So it's also a very different kind of text form, and trying to replicate that in versioning machine, which was really designed, the original tool, for lyric texts, short lyric text. It works okay for prose and paragraphs, but things that have any kind of odd indentation, I showed you the Arabic text with the columns, it's very difficult to use with the built-in functions of that tool. And then the final example I think I'm going to show you is a Chinese text. Yeah, and so here also you can see this one on the right-hand side, the English, that's translating just the first paragraph of the Chinese. So at this point, the highlighting function doesn't make that much sense. We don't have images because many, the availability of manuscript or early print images really is dependent on different traditions of scholarship and preservation. And we have a lot more access to those things when we're working on European texts than, for example, on Chinese texts. So this actually weirdly looks quite a lot more like the kind of traditional facing page translation in the book. And yet we've been using this tool that maybe has made some things harder for us. So this is all about versioning machine. Obviously, we needed a way to have a kind of landing page to look at this site. And what we went for with that was Drupal. And as I said, we came into this project with very little experience. I had made a WordPress site in the past, but I didn't even know what Drupal was. And so we just said, yeah, let's go for it. That had been a previous project that the ATS had done just before, had been in Drupal. So I think he felt very comfortable with it and just said, great, this is the best way to do it. It's got a big community using Drupal, it makes sense. So we did. So I'll show you a couple of the Drupal pages. The next page, next slide, please, is our current home page. So we have a kind of menu. We have at this point more than 120 texts. I think on the site right now, it's slightly fewer than that, but it's still a large number. And so we have this kind of image-based menu, and then we have a search text function, which is actually just filters based on language, period, other kinds of tags that we put in there. author where known, and language that the text is written in. And then we have to kind of try to navigate this very diverse collection. We created collections, so sort of sub collections, which are curated thematically, which are all have a diversity of kind of cultural and linguistic material in them, so that they kind of work. If you wanted to put it into a course on medieval culture, you could say, here's some love songs, and they'd actually span kind of the globe, which is cool. So we've done more things since to try and make this a navigable collection. But fundamentally, the functions of Drupal that we're using are really basic. We initially thought, oh, we'll have people submit text through the site. We didn't find that that worked very well, and we reverted to email. We have had at various points like a slider to show the promote different collections. We've also had a timeline to show when different things were created. But given the diversity of the material, something that we continued to find was it really privileged the material that fits more into that it's easier to display that way, which tended to be Western material. And we really didn't want to center the West in this. And so as a result, some of the things that we thought about, like, oh, we can map exactly where things were produced or whatever, it just actually doesn't really make sense for most of our collection. And so what we've reverted to is what we actually can do to make everything on a level footing, which actually is strangely much more like the kind of initial text translation and then an introduction. So on the next slide, you can see that every text in the collection has an introduction page. And that has kind of an introduction to the text, a little bit about decisions that were made in translating or transcribing it, and some further reading. And so the purpose of this site really is, it's great for scholars so that we can have kind of an expanded view of what material is out there, but primarily it's a teaching tool so that these things should be easily used in classes. And I have used this material in my own classes, and I know that colleagues of mine have too. So when we first started, we kind of thought, well, people can submit their material and they can use it in any way that it makes sense to them. But as we've been seeing over the past 5 years, teaching seems to be the principal way in which this material is useful to our colleagues. I think I'll stop there.
All right, so here's the quick Drupal recap for the Drupal folks. Again, there were multiple taxonomies for metadata. Most of the categories that you saw on the metadata screen when looking at an individual text were stored as taxonomies. Node references getting from group text to collections. And then there was this custom module that did XSLT to convert the uploaded TEI encoded XML into the versioning machine static HTML pages, which were themed to look the same as the Drupal site, but lived entirely outside of Drupal. They were just sort of static HTML pages. All right. Oh, do you want to talk about the PDS, May?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to conclude, so as I said, it's been kind of half a decade of work on this, and we had a goal to kind of build out the collection to be diverse, to have material from like a wide range of genres and periods within the kind of medieval period, which is very long, and also languages and geographic regions. And that was a real goal because that is something that other collections don't do. So having kind of achieved that goal, we then sort of set a cap on how much material do we actually feasibly think we can process. And I think when we started this project, we thought, oh, processing the material that's submitted to us is not going to be difficult. That's going to be the easy part. We're just going to put it online. But actually, once you become a curator of material, as I'm sure many of you know, that is something that takes a lot of energy and reflection and creating standards and creating processes. So ultimately, I think what I come back to in thinking about sort of turning this project into something static so that we'll no longer be in the phase of acquiring new materials, is it kind of ending the project? Well, I think from the beginning, the project was really about preserving what we've done to these translations, and that translation group died many years ago at this point, but it was preserving the translations that we made and keeping them accessible. And that's something that can go on into the future, but what we want to be able to transition into is a mode where there is not upkeep in a daily way, in a regular way at all. We don't need to acquire new material, but we need to make sure that this thing is still usable. And we were very concerned that with the Drupal site and having to kind of migrate to Drupal 8, it was going to be a lot of work, and still like the future would be uncertain. And so that became the kind of key concern, was how can we pull back any active work that we're doing on this, because we're happy with what we've done, but we need it to still function as a usable pedagogical resource. And how do we do that? And I think one of the things that probably would surprise ourselves 5 years ago is that we understand now the kind of most common use case is for people to want to take this material and teach it. And so what we've actually ended up reverting to are kind of custom done PDFs, which look a lot like book layouts, that are easily printable, easily you can assign them via Canvas or whatever other kind of teaching platform you're using for students to read and to use in that way. Obviously, they can also be used for research. And so that's one type of material that we really have been keen to preserve, is the easy to use PDF for someone who doesn't have any particular technical know-how, but just can download or can read on the screen. The other thing that we wanted to preserve is the TEI, which was what underpins the TEI XML. So XML markup, but according to the Text Encoding Initiative standards, which are created by humanists, many of you may be aware of them, and they are sort of standards for producing digital editions. One of the quirks of versioning machine is that it actually requires a somewhat unconventional use of TEI because it splices together the texts and the translations, or the different versions of the text. So we have slightly weird TEI. It's fine. Obviously, you can write a script and pull the different sections apart, but it's not necessarily what you might anticipate. But we've decided that that will also be downloadable and preserved through the Stanford Digital Repository for the future, because we want scholars to be able to do with it what they want. But what we're actually abandoning in our move to a static site is the versioning machine as a text display tool. And I think at the beginning we thought, oh, we're losing something. And at this point, we really feel like it's good to say goodbye to that piece.
All right. So was this one yours or?
Yep. Sorry, I was just going to say that it's really difficult to tell, but it basically is just showing that the splicing together of the text and the translation, which is not how you'd necessarily expect a TI edition to look. But that's, yeah. So these two pieces, the PDFs and this, are what will be available to download from our new site and also from the Stanford Digital Repository. Thank you. Oh, right. Finally, apologies. Finally, we actually have, it's been such a process of reflection and thinking about how to make this a sustainable, preserved resource, which we can kind of like let go of the active part of and still be able to be useful for people. And so that has actually ended up generating a paper, which is coming out in the next couple of months. So it's out of our hands at this point, but it will come out in the journal Seminar. So look out for that if you're interested. Thank you.
All right, so onto the static websites. The static websites are kind of having a moment, over the last 5 to 7 years, particularly in digital humanities circles. There's been a lot of work advocating for them, particularly around the minimal computing movement, thinking about kind of the technological resources that are required to run and maintain these kinds of complex sites, and encouraging people to think about kind of what is the minimum thing that we need versus all the bells and whistles that we would want. So Jekyll is one of the major ones for people who don't like Jekyll. There's Hugo. More recently, there's Jupyter Book. If you're doing more computational work, it's a way to turn Jupyter code notebooks into a static website. It's sort of an interesting direction. One of the other kind of platforms built using Jekyll is called Wax, which was developed by Alex Gill and others, that basically creates a static exhibit site. So very similar to kind of what we had on the Brueghel site, very similar to Omeka sites, if you're familiar with that platform for doing digital exhibits. And one of the interesting things is it includes, for those of you who are deeper into the tech side, a IIIF viewer without having to run all of the IIIF infrastructure for creating image derivatives. So if you have super high-res images where you want to be able to zoom all the way into it, it's a way to provide that functionality without actually running a bunch of infrastructure behind the scenes. It's all static HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Dynamic versus static workflows are something to consider with Drupal or other CMSs. If you want to like add a taxonomy, you go, all right, taxonomy, add new vocabulary, type in some terms. Here, though, you have to deal with YAML files, which are very, very particularly formatted plain text files, where if you get a spacing wrong or if you put a tab in, the whole, like your entire site will fail to load until you fix it. Looking at like the search index, again, you might check some like boxes in Drupal for which fields you want to index. Here, again, it's all in YAML. Your menu looks something like this, where again, you're sort of structuring it in very particular plain text. And this on the far right is the equivalent to what you would do in the field display configuration for a content type, saying, all right, these are the labels and these are the values that you're pulling for it. Views data export really was the hero of both of these conversion processes, getting all of the data that had been manually entered into Drupal out in a CSV format. And Wax is designed to work with CSVs, where like that's actually what you feed it here. This is the CSV for the Brueghel site, where we took the data that we exported from Drupal and wrote a few scripts to kind of turn some of the kind of data values into HTML values that would make it easier for Jekyll to display. If I were better with Liquid and Ruby syntax, maybe I could have made the data do this sort of on the Jekyll end, but sometimes it's just easier to pre-bake some HTML. This didn't replace any of the data, but it's sort of an added column onto the spreadsheet. So if you wanted to get back to the data itself, you still can. Sorting out tags. Tags are like such a core thing that we think of with Drupal and other content management sites, where like obviously like you give it terms, you click on the terms, it gives you all the things with the terms, but you actually kind of have to like construct that system yourself with Jekyll, which is sort of unfortunate. You end up with this somewhat convoluted syntax of like looping through all of the different things in a vocabulary on the site, seeing if they match, and if so, constructing links. But luckily that code is something that you can find online, like largely pre-baked. So you don't have to kind of invent all the syntax from scratch, especially if you're not as familiar with Liquid, which I certainly wasn't when I started. So the site as it currently stands still needs to undergo some theming. But it's sort of broadly similar. We have the a ways to sort of browse the collection by different major facets. These are two parts of the same page. They're very long and not very good for slides, but here we have a large image up at the top. Some of these different collection types, exhibition history, related works are clickable, and these are the tags here. And then if you click on some of them, if you click on the battle tag, you see this gallery of other battle images. And if you go to Otto van Veen, you can see a biography complete with a large image of him, all as part of the same site. But what if images aren't the point? And we actually had this discussion with the Global Medieval Sourcebook of, do we want to use Wax or not? And ultimately, we decided that we didn't want to use Wax because this is mostly a text and metadata focused project. So we ended up using just straight up Jekyll and creating these markdown pages. And it looks like my layers are not working very well, but suffice it to say, there's a Python script that I wrote fairly straightforward to extract the values from the spreadsheet and turn them into markdown. We also have a similar thing for constructing these links. And the site as it currently stands is built off of some design work that had been done by Carnegie Mellon for the Digital Humanities Literary Guidebook. And currently ours looks very similar in terms of colors. Apologies for that. We're working on updating that and fixing it, but we still get the same kinds of collection pages. We have the text pages. We have these kind of gallery views along different facets. So leaving Drupal behind, it's a lot easier to build sites using Drupal, without a doubt. Being able to have an easy content entry interface, being able to set up something that you can just pass off to a scholar and say, all right, it's a form, you know how to use forms, put your data in here. Much easier to have people build things. But over the long term, the burden of having to deal with every update, what happens with the major version updates where you have to fundamentally rewrite code? What if the site gets hacked? The Global Medieval Sourcebook got hacked at one point and was used to like mine Bitcoin or something like that. the amount of labor that goes into literally just keeping the thing alive and breathing is a huge constraint, particularly for the technical collaborators whose lives can basically be consumed by Drupal maintenance. If you know, and there's literally no end to it until you choose to end it. There is no end to the maintenance and upkeep work that goes into a dynamic website. So rethinking what we can do, if not at the beginning, then certainly with an eye towards ending projects. Static websites really provide a compelling alternative that's worth considering. Thank you.
Should we open the floor to questions, maybe? Could we maybe have people ask questions in the chat, or unmute yourself if you have any questions, or raise your hand. All right, Ellie, you could go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ellie Bleker. I'm from Amsterdam. I work at the Huygens Institute for Dutch Culture and History. So first of all, thanks to all three of the speakers for this very eye-opening talk. And I'm currently working on some proposals for long-term sustainable access to digital scholarly editions. And what we are working towards is also, well, static websites. And it feels like a loss, because when I was trained as a digital scholarly editor, and well, first of all, we were told the text is most important. And second of all, we were told that the interface and the interaction and the dynamics of a digital scholarly edition were so much better than their print counterpart that, you know, this was the future. And it feels like we're about 30 years in now, and everyone is slowly moving towards the static again. And I was especially taken by the images you showed me of these PDF, these PDFs. And I was thinking, yeah, is this going back to the book? Because we do not have any real methods for now to preserve this dynamic interface. Or is this temporary? Or were we too hopeful in the beginning when we envisioned these dynamic editions? Yeah, I'm just curious to hear your opinion, because obviously all three of you are very experienced. So yeah, thank you.
I'm happy to chip in, and then others can jump in as well. So yeah, it is strange to kind of move backwards to an older format. I think the thing that was clear to me is that as a scholar-run project, we just don't have the infrastructure to do something that would support the kind of technical day-to-day management of having to upgrade something. And one of the options that we actually considered was, can we kind of merge our project or kind of join a larger thing that already has the kind of infrastructure to do that. And so, for example, Stanford University Press is known for also supporting kind of hybrid digital and book projects and kind of these like digital monographs, and we talked to them about that. And ultimately, our project is not sufficiently, it doesn't fit their criteria because it isn't sufficiently argument driven. And so we actually were looking to see whether there would be a way to kind of preserve the dynamism, or at least move into another dynamic state by joining a larger organization. And we actually looked at a few, and there didn't seem to be any obvious candidates. So I'm not sure if that is likely to continue, but right now at this moment in time, we found that was actually the hardest part, was that all of the sort of funding opportunities for us were to continue to build out our own system, which we were finding, I mean, similar to what Elizabeth was saying, it just kind of, you have to keep adding things in your own little project rather than being able to somehow share that labor across projects. And so I hope that will change, but at the time that we were making those decisions, like it seemed like there wasn't a good option.
Yeah, your experience echoes mine. I at sort of the midway point in this whole trajectory, really actively looked around to try to find a sort of adoptive home where this project could be part of a larger system at an institution where it would be maintained, because I could not personally be the person who would maintain this forever. In particular, I really tried to lean on the people at the RKD, the RKD in The Hague, to be my family, or at the Rubenianum in Antwerp. It just and they were interested, but only if I was going to expand it into something that would incorporate like lots more artists. They didn't, and I was hoping they would want to do something that would incorporate lots more artists. So there was just never anything that could take on a project of this size. That was it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think building on that too, you know, I think you're onto something, that I think we were too hopeful when it comes to DH. We were too hopeful that there would be more kind of institutional investment at the infrastructure level. Like, you know, if the kind of tools and the like both human and technical infrastructure for being able to run, if not all kinds of DH web-based projects, but certain kinds at least, like had been something that there had been a coordinated effort to develop at the national level, at the international level, even at the like local institutional level. But what we get, you know, maybe with the exception of Daria, which has its own kind of piecemeal problems, the DH research infrastructure in Europe across the EU that's, you know, funded, you know, on a scale larger than anything certainly we've seen in the US, is that funding has been, you know, time and time again for one-off projects, rather than like, what if we had a Drupal or any other hosting platform available through the NEH and you apply to it? I mean, the NSF has this for compute. You can just apply to the NSF and get like all the compute power you want. What if we could get like comparable infrastructure in the US? But that has never happened, and it's unlikely to happen. And that's just like not how things have gone. So I feel like we sort of hit this wall where like we're at the limit of what individual scholars can do. And there's also no sign that things are going to change towards greater infrastructural collectivity. And so we have to pare it down, because the thing with DH work is, you know, it takes a tremendous amount of time and labor to do. And if there's no way to scale that, then we have to do something else, or individual scholars have to develop the tech skills and be willing to spend their nights and weekends doing it. And you know, you can't blame anyone for not wanting to do that.
See a couple questions in the chat, but this is about the end of the time we have for this session. Thank you very much,